Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 28. Today's episode is for anyone who has found it a challenge to balance life and work and family and time for creativity, and maybe that's all of us. My guest touches on how she manages all this, as well as the little shifts in mindset that we need to make when deciding what's achievable during the intense time of parenting youngsters or managing a busy work life. Before we jump in, I'd like to say a big thank you to all the new listeners supporting the podcast on Patreon. Your help means so much and it keeps this project going. If you'd like to join us, you can go to patreon.com/journaling with nature. So let's get into it. Today, my guest is Marina Cerra. Marina lives in Italy and is a botanical artist who fits art and nature connection into the spare moments wherever she can find them, among the business of work and family life. I love this conversation because it was full of insights on the importance of simple moments and how we can sometimes circle back to things that were significant in childhood, remembering our roots and what's important. Marina also dives into details of her art practice and the way she connects with plants in her work. There's so much covered here. Let's listen. Thank you so much for being here with me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Bethan, for inviting me here.
I always start at the beginning, and I'm wondering about you, and I'm wondering about whether or not you had nature in your childhood.
I kind of did, probably not in like the conventional way, because I grew up in a seaside town. So basically, the only nature we had, it was like sandy beaches and the sea. But my family, they were owning a vineyard nearby with olive trees, and my mom, she loves growing vegetables, and we had fruit trees as well. So she would bring us there almost every afternoon after school. I'm talking about like very early memories, childhood, primary school probably. So we used to spend mostly of our afternoon there, just like running around with my brother, and sometimes we'd bring friends as well. And also I used to play a lot in my grandparents' garden. They had as well like vegetable patches and fruit trees. So even if we didn't like live out in the wild, but we did have as a kids contact with nature as well. And also my dad he used to organize Sundays out with friends, like picking mushroom and out in the forest. So it was a very like nature connected childhood. So we did a lot of activities together outdoor, and also spending reminding me now of summer. We spent summer camping. It wasn't a seaside location, but we were actually in pine forest. So it was like wild and all sorts of plants, and basically living outside most of the day. It was quite an experience.
Those are beautiful, beautiful memories. I love especially the experience of children like connecting with in the garden. I was thinking of your grandparents' garden and how it's so valuable, I think, for children to see how plants grow and then become food. Like that sort of garden to plate idea is such an important one, and one that I think sticks with kids.
It does. I actually, all my childhood memory, they came back after I turned 30, like in a way that I didn't imagine. It was something that I almost forgotten for about 20 years. Because when you're a teenager, then you tend to do different things, especially growing up in a city or in a town. Then your interest changes dramatically, and you basically keep going with your life without thinking about what you did as a kid. And then all of a sudden, you reach a point in your life when you start looking back to find like your roots or your interests,
Yes.
and everything comes back, and it comes back in a different way. Like it has a different meaning that it had when you were a child. And so that's the reconnection. That's what happened to me. Basically, I came back to my roots through what I did as a kid with my parents, and it was very, very nice. So that's what I'm trying to replicate things with my kids as well.
Yes, yes.
The experience that I had as a kid that helped me when growing up, like after I said it was about 20 years after I experienced those things with my as a kid. So I'm trying to replicate things with my own children, and I can tell that they are interested up to a point. Like it's like, I don't know, we have a very tiny balcony, but we keep like growing things, whatever we can find. Or my kids, they bring like beans from school, and then we plant them, then they see the plant growing and everything. And I can tell it's just, for them, it's just like a simple activity, like it is, I don't know, playing with Legos or watching TV. But I know that when they grow up, this experience, it will somehow still be in their memories, and they will use it, whatever they decide to use it, but it will be part of their childhood that can help them understand who they are and what they like, and make sense.
Yeah, yeah. Isn't that interesting that the things that appear simple in childhood, they actually really significant later on? I think that's a really beautiful thing to remember, that you give them these simple experiences, but they're actually really significant, and they will be really beautiful memories in the future.
I hope so. I hope so. They might remember different things when they grow up, but if they do wonder and question and trying to remember what they did as a kid with their parents, then I hope this will be one of the many they will remember. Yes.
Tell me about art. So you're an artist now. I'm wondering about, if we go back, have you always loved art? How did you get into painting?
Well, to be honest, this is another childhood memory, because I did some oil painting classes with my mom. I think I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I love drawing, and like every kid does, I guess. And then after a while it stopped. Like when I was a teenager, I wouldn't like grab a pencil to do anything. It was just like something that I would not do. So I grew up without, I mean, it was always in the back of my mind, the experience that I had, and something that I enjoy doing, but it was more like a childish thing to do. That's how I saw it. And then I was late in my 30s, not early in my 30s, sorry, that I started going back to my childhood memories. So I was looking for like an outlet, a creative outlet after work. And that's how I started like going to evening art classes. And that's when I gradually went back to art. So it hasn't been part of my entire life, but it was like childhood experience. And then later on in life, I pick it up from where I left.
Yeah.
Basically, so I started like beginners classes, and I picked watercolor because that's what the available class at the time. And I started from there. So I started like doing these evening classes, but then at the same time, I started to analyze my interest in art and where it came from, and why I had like put behind all these things that I liked doing as a kid, and then they disappeared for a while and then came back in full force. So art has been part of my life, but I would say since I turned 30, more or less. Yes. So it was a late rediscovery.
That's beautiful in itself. It's almost the same story, like rediscovering things that were important in childhood, art and nature, and now you put them together in such a beautiful way.
Yes.
Those two things.
Yes, it was like I had like a gap between who I was as a child and who I am now. So it was like a link between the two part of my life. They were basically connected, but probably forgotten because I got like, I don't know, caught up with life, or maybe needed different experiences to then go back to my roots and realize what was actually meaningful to me and helpful to move on with things I like.
I love that about getting older. Like, I'm now at an age that my parents were when I started developing memories, middle age, and I wouldn't go back to my youth for anything. When you're young, you think, oh, it's so difficult. You don't want to get older. Or you don't want to be your parents' age. And now I am my parents' age, if you know what I mean. And and I love it. I absolutely love it. The perspective that you get, the mellowing and the realization of what's really important and things you can leave behind and things that you hold that are important. I think that's beautiful.
It is, yes. I think it's because, I mean, at least for me, going back to my roots, it's been like a journey to rediscover myself. It's like I got lost for about 10 years and then I came back, and I feel more comfortable now because I know exactly what I like, and some people might like it, some other might not like it, but that's who I am. And I guess because I did this study, like I did write down physically what was I liked when I was a kid and what were the things I like and what not. And actually it made me feel stronger to what I believe, the things I believe now. Because I know it comes from an age when you actually don't understand. You do just what you like without thinking about everything else and without caring about what other people think, which are things that when you grow older, then at some point you do get like peer pressure. So you tend to do what other people do and very careful of what you say and what are the things you like and what not. But then you reach a point where these things don't matter anymore.
Yes.
So basically you focus on what is good for you, what your beliefs, and it all makes sense. It all started to make sense. And I guess like having kids, it helps you with that because
yes, that's true.
They are open. They are like, they have no nothing stop them to do what they like. They just like go in full force, and that makes you think. That makes you think like why they can be like that, and you are still so like concerned about the environment.
Yes.
So they help me a lot with that, because it's also even because when you have kids, you want to give like a good example to your kids. So knowing your struggles, you want them to overcome them in the best possible way. So the journey that I had, it did help me a lot with focusing on these things that I think I can pass on as well.
I love all the things this conversation is bringing out, just about what's important, where to focus. I'm really keen to talk with you about family life because I read that you're an engineer by day, an artist by night, and you're parenting 2 young kids. And I'm wondering about that, how you manage to fit in painting around all these other family commitments and work commitments and all that. Do you have any tips about that?
I wouldn't call them tips, but because this is like an ongoing process.
Yeah.
An ongoing process because the circumstances change, the kids change. So it's been like an ongoing process. When my first daughter was born, I thought I had a lot of time because I said, okay, I'm not working in the morning, so what's the best time to do what I like doing, like painting, on going for walks and everything. And then it was like that for probably the first 2 months because she was very little, so she would sleep mostly all day. And that thing started changing, so she needed more attention. And so one thing about me that I like is that I'm able to change with circumstances. I adapt very well with whatever I'm offered. So basically what I start doing, I start bringing with me a sketchbook. So we would go, I don't know, for a walk in a park, then she would fall asleep. I would sit on a bench and just draw, or even in a car. We used to go to like gymboree and like music classes in the morning, and she would all the time fall asleep just before we went in. So I spent hours and hours in the car, just like in the parking lot. She would fall asleep, and I didn't want to bring her home. So I took the time that I had
Yes.
whenever I could. And that helped me, like, probably to change the mindset. Because at the beginning it was a struggle. I wanted like to have like set amount of time during the
Yes.
day to do my stuff, and then I realized that that wasn't possible because you can't force a kid to sleep whenever you want. So it basically was like a way of adjusting around things, and you become good at that.
Yes.
As you practice, you become good at that. And then I had the second kid, which like bring like chaos into the mix. And also we had an overseas move because it was a couple of months before my second child was born that we moved from London to Rome. So it was like another bit of chaos and another need for adjustment. But at the same time, I brought with me the knowledge that I could fit things around.
Yes.
Like, of course, saying no to lots of other things. But the experience that I had when my daughter was born, I was able to replicate it with my second child. So in the morning, I would bring my oldest kids to school with the baby in the car, and then if he would fall asleep, I would just wait in the car and draw. And the same at home. I did try to. Initially, I was like working even in the evening when my kids would fall asleep, but then like you build up a bit of tiredness, so it became a bit more difficult to do that. Having said that, it is true that you can adjust around things, but at the same time, you have to adjust your thinking and like try not to put too much on yourself, like making big projects and pretend to finish things on time.
Yes.
So that is a bit of a struggle. The organizing of things, deadlines, and everything. It is a bit difficult because, of course, like things you can forecast happens all the time. So even if you do plan in advance and are trying to organize things as best as you can, then you have to take into account that anything can happen at any time. So you have to have flexibilities. But I think the flexibility, it doesn't have to be like a physical flexibility, more like a mental shift. Of what you're planning to do, what you actually can do in that time. And I'm still very optimistic when I plan things and I say, oh yes, I can do that, I can fit that, and like move things and shift things around. But that doesn't always happen, and it can be a bit frustrating at times, but you just get on with it and try to make it workable.
Yes, adjusting the mindset is a really good tip. Because yeah, it is easy, especially if you've been creating before you have kids, to think or want to produce things at the same rate as you did before you had kids, or to join different projects, or yeah, to have big plans, and just to say this is what I can do. I can sketch in the car while my child is sleeping, and that's enough. That's enough for now, and that's a really beautiful and important mindset shift. And that's a lot as well, to even have the forethought to bring your sketchbook with you and to say, this is my time, I'm going to sketch while he's asleep. That's great, and that's a big achievement, isn't it?
To be honest, there was a point where I had one sketchbook in the car with all the tools, and another one and like in between the pillows of my couch. So sometimes like the kids would like play on the ground, and then I was sitting on the couch and I said, well, just grab the sketchbook and do like quick sketches. So that helped a lot, because by the time you like get up and reach for your sketchbook and your gear, the child moves around, so it's not always possible to do that. But to be honest, nowadays my kids are 9 and 6, so things have improved a lot in a way, because they can join me.
Tell me about that. Do you create as a family?
My husband not so much, but with the kids, yes.
Yeah.
They actually, there was a time when we do a lot of stuff together. There was an age where they were much more interesting in what I was doing. So if they did see me grab my sketchbook, they would do the same with theirs. So they do have a pencil case with a pen, a pencil, and some colors as well. Because especially when we go like for a walk, even if sometimes they don't feel like playing, so they just sit next to me and then they sketch as well. And that was quite fun. That was quite fun because I never forced anything on them.
Yes.
I mean, I introduce them to things that I do, and then sometimes they feel like doing them. Sometimes they're just not interested whatsoever. But they know that if they want, they can join me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's quite helpful because sometimes they do it on their own without even asking. They've got their own gear, their own tool set and everything. So they just like grab what they need and then they just go with it. But we do like things as a family, especially during the holidays. We did have like painting sessions or drawing session. Or we have a season corner in our house where we put all like seasonal things,
Oh, wow.
gathering from natures, and we do every year we do like a new drawing, or we do collages with leaves, and we hang it on the wall. So they are like free to put their own stuff, their drawings in our house. Yes.
Again, I think these are memories they're just going to take with them, even if they have a gap like you did in teenage years. I think they'll always remember, oh, Mum was doing creative stuff with us, and those memories are going to be significant later on.
To be honest, they don't know what I do for a living,
Okay.
but they do know that I like drawing plants and collecting things from nature, because they always bring me from school like leaves or berries to draw.
Yes.
And so they have like their pockets full of this kind of stuff, or even rocks sometimes. So, oh, we can paint that. So that was quite amazing, yes.
My boy does that to me too. He bring in an insect's wing, or someone left on my desk the other day a dead frog. And
Oh, wow.
But my son always says, I brought this for you. And it's so sweet because it's an understanding, even if they're not quite sure exactly what you do, they know that these nature treasures are important.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to tell me about nature around you. So you live in Rome, you said you have a small balcony, and I'm wondering, tell me about accessing nature where you are and what nature looks like for you now.
Where we are is actually very easy to access parks and all sorts of. We live in the south side of Rome, so it's not in the city center. So we have like basically surrounded by parks. So if you do live in Rome, it feels like where we living almost in the countryside, because like within 5 minutes walk, you are in like big parks. And because they're, I wouldn't say neglected, but they're like left as they are, because the weather here is quite, we have nice weather almost all year round. So nature-wise is brilliant because you have sun almost 365 days a year. We have maybe not so much rain, but it does rain. So that helps plants grow wild every time of the year. And that is quite amazing, because seriously, it feels, if you just go to the park around the house, which is it's a very small park, it's not that big, but it feels like you're walking away from the city and you're in a different place. So it does help a lot. It does help a lot, especially this period that we are basically bounded within our walls because of the pandemic. Being able just to go for a walk in nearby park is very, very helpful. It's helpful for the kids. They can like run wild and free without even keeping the masks down.
Yes.
And it helps. It helps if you're struggling, if you're stressed, then just going for a walk, a simple walk, without having, you go out with no purpose. You just go out for a walk, and that helps a lot. And it is very accessible here in Rome. There are lots of big parks and small areas between the buildings. We even have like a communal garden in our buildings. So even if we can't get out the gate, then at the same time we have like a walk around the block.
That's wonderful.
It is, it is.
So important during these times to have that access, and not only for physical health to be out in the air, but for mental health, for just feeling calm, getting through it. I'm glad to hear that you've got good access to
I
those
guess
places.
it's also the change of scenery because, you know, you're always like, especially this time, in front of a computer in your house. Then even
Yes.
if you look outside, you see buildings and the car and traffic and everything. And then being able to switch off and even change the color that you see. Because if you go in a park, then you have greens and the sky, and that's what you see, and that's it. So even like a change of perspective, it does help. It does help to calm your mind. And I don't know, it feels like meditation sometimes.
Yes.
When you go out, exactly, and all your worries disappear, and it's very, very nice.
I love that you said that about color, because I was going to ask you about color, in fact, so let's talk about that now. I noticed that you often include color swatches on your journal pages, and I love doing this too. I think it adds a beautiful element to the page, and I feel like when you're discovering the color of something in a painting, it helps you deepen your knowledge and understanding of your subject. And I'd like to know about how you feel about color. What's your relationship with color, and what colors do you love? What colors do you use most? All that stuff. I'd love just to have a general chat about color.
Okay, I will start saying that my favorite color is yellow. Yellow like the sun. It is my favorite color. But in watercolor is a very difficult color to use.
Yes.
Because you can't get too many shades.
Do you have a particular one that you choose in watercolor?
The Indian yellow probably is my favorite because it's a very like strong yellow. So it is one of my favorite color, and especially here in Rome you can find lots of wildflower, yellow wildflowers, and it also reminds me of the sun, the summertime. So it is like a color that makes me happy. Other colors, green is another one that I like, probably because it's the main color of plants and wildflowers. Difficult to get because there are so many different greens.
Yes.
So what I do, basically, I tend to stick whatever color palette I have handy. So I don't have like favorite colors. I just use what I think is like proper to use, trying to get the right color for the plant I'm drawing. But at the same time, if I don't get the same color, fine, I will use whatever I have.
Yes.
So I'm not very strict color-wise. But I do like to add the colors that I use. So when I do sketching, sometimes I do, especially if I find the right color, I used to write it down because it does give to the page a nice feeling.
Yes.
Because it feels like you're studying the plant, you're studying the color that goes with it. So it does add something more, and also it's also a good base for if you wanna go from sketching to painting. Then you have like a color palette. Then you can start working with. So it is. I do like to add the color swatches.
Yeah, I love
into
that.
my sketches. Yes, this is something that I learned while I was doing evening classes, watercolor classes. Because sometimes you do make a painting and then you forget what color you use. So even if you like want to replicate in the same painting the same leaf, then you have to make sure that you're using the same color. Otherwise, you get two different greens. So that helps a lot, even if you're like doing a painting study. What I normally bring with me is a small tin box, like a metal one, where I added a few colors randomly, the one that I had handy, or like I had two different greens. So I say, okay, I'm gonna put them on the same palette and see what works. So I do tend to use whatever I can find at the moment, and I don't have a set palette of colors that I always use. Also, I have a few, so it depends which ones I bring when I go out sketching. Yeah, but I do suggest for each of the color palette that I have, I normally have a laid out piece of paper with all the colors, and I tend to tend to mix them as well and put them on paper. So I have like a small sketchbook with the plain color in my palette, and then the mix and match of those. So I know what kind of color I can get without improvising too much. That's helpful as well. And I have one for every color palette that I have. So it is useful, yes.
Yeah. Yes. I saw that you had done, in a blog post I read, you did a seasonal palette, and it was like capturing the colors of the seasons. And I really thought that was a beautiful idea. And I don't know if it would work here where I am because it's evergreen and things, I guess there are different colors that change over the seasons, but generally it's always very green. But I loved what you did to capture the colors of each season.
It was an idea that I got from a book. I think it was the Eden Project, which is a book like an illustration, botanical illustration course done by the Eden Gardens in England, and they did suggest to make like a seasonal palette. And what I normally do, I can do it like in one. I think the one that you mentioned, it was done over a few days. Basically, you go out and you look around the color that you see and you just put them down. So it could be the sky or the grass or even the buildings, because sometimes, in winter, they have the shades are different than summertime. And then it was quite fun. It was quite fun because you can either use it to get like a feeling of the season. You don't have necessarily to use those specific color in winter and not in summer, but it does give you like a warmth or cool feel of the surroundings.
It made me think about seasonality here and the changes of color over a season. And there's definitely, now I'm thinking about it, there's definitely certain colors that dominate. And so the middle of the year is our winter. And so in June and July, we have wattle season, and wattle is this beautiful yellow native. There's lots of different species, but they just burst out with this incredible yellow color. And we have in Brisbane a lot of jacaranda trees, and they're not native, but they're covering the city, and they come out bright purple. And so that's in November, and that's definitely a color of that season. And it makes me think I want to do this thing of like keeping notice of the color through the year. I love it.
Even if you're looking like a single species or like a single plant, then it does, especially if it's like evergreen, then it does change color, because you have like a sprouts in spring, so the green is like more subtle, more warm than it is in winter. So even if you take a single plant, then you could do like a chart, like a color chart throughout the year and see how it changes. So it helps with the observation skills.
Yeah, it does. You're absolutely right. Tell me about structured projects, because I noticed that sometimes you create challenges for yourself. You did one that was a 2-week holiday sketch challenge, and I saw that you did a 100-day project for 100 days of leaves, 100 days of wildflowers. Tell me about this, because I've got some things to say about challenges, because I started Inktober and I got really into it for the first 5 days, and then I stopped because I got busy, and then there's something inside me that's like, I need to finish this even though it's months over. And I have this funny relationship to challenges, and I'm wondering about your experience with committing to challenges.
To be honest, I've had some struggles as well with challenges, because they do help me sometimes. There are like times where it's like dry spell. I cannot get anything done or anything. So basically having a challenge helps you like put your mindset to do something, to make time to do something, because I think that is another problem, that you tend to get on with life and not make time for things that you like to do, especially when there are family commitments and other things. So sometimes the challenge forces you to find time to do things. But I guess having the right motivation is the key to carry on until the end, because there is, especially if you're on Instagram or like social network, there is a challenge every day. Any kind of challenge.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
You can like put up very easily and say, okay, today I'm gonna start this with all the like best intention in the world. And I'm very like optimistic every time I start a challenge. I say, oh, I'm gonna do this and get it through the end, and I'm gonna make time every single day. And then day two, something comes up and it all goes down the drain. So it is, I guess the key is seriously to find the right purpose and asking why you want to do this. It does help making time. So if your purpose is making time every day to do something, then having a challenge helps you because it like puts you in the right direction. You know exactly, you have 10 minutes, you know exactly what to do in those 10 minutes. So you don't have to think about, oh, I have 10 minutes free, what should I do? By the time you decide what to do, time is gone and you end up with nothing. So in this sense, having a challenge, it does help. But keeping on with it, it also a challenge. So it is, I did start with like long time project and it was a struggle both times. The first time I managed to get to the 100 leaves with some struggles in the middle, but then somehow I managed to finish it because at that time it was me getting back into do something for me. So I said, okay, I decided to do it and I'm gonna finish it. The second time with the wildflower, I stopped at 50.
Yeah, 50 is great though.
It was, and I managed to do it because I was setting time every day to do it. So, and one day I would do two, so I could free up some time, like especially during the weekend, where the kids were around, so I would know if I had time to do it. So sometimes they do help because they force you to find the time.
And even though it's a challenge, then out of that project, you created a beautiful poster, Wildflowers of Italy, which is such a achievement.
I even made some fabric prints with the all the flowers. Yes, it was nice, but that helped me not just for making time to draw, but also because I learned a lot about plants.
Yeah.
Because I don't have an education in botany whatsoever, so it did help me like started to get into the physiognomy of the plants and all the different parts. So there was like more like a study project than just like a drawing challenge. And I think that was the motivation that kept me going. I was learning something new every day. So I was motivated to find different aspects of a plant that I wouldn't otherwise look at in general. One because I didn't have the knowledge, and one because I didn't have the time. You know, you focus on the flowers because it's pretty, but at the same time you don't see how the flower is attached to the stem or the leaves developed and the surroundings of the plant. So it was, I guess, there was the drive for me to reach 50 wildflowers.
I feel like that's a really big achievement.
Yes, it was. To be honest, when you're in the middle of the project, you don't see the end is quite difficult, the struggling. But then if you manage to reach to the end point, and then you look back and say, oh my God, it's unbelievable, I managed to do that. And that is, I guess, is much better than while you're in the middle of the project.
Yes. One of my guests committed to a daily leaf. It was an artist from Canada called Lee Angold, and she did a daily leaf every day for a year. And she said that she had a lot of struggles, but at the end she had this like collection of leaves which she exhibited, and she couldn't believe how big the collection was. And I asked her, would you do it again? And she said, absolutely not. But at the end it was positive. But yeah, there's, I guess
the daily commitment is a lot. It's a lot, even if it's like a month or so. So that's why the 2-week holiday sketchbook challenge, that was more fun because I said exactly, it was 2 weeks, but it was actually 7 pages to be filled. For each day, it was, for each drawing, I had a span of 2 days. So I could plan and it was much more relaxed. So I did have like a, let's call it deadline, but it was more stretched over 2 days. So it was much more manageable.
Yes.
And I guess this is another thing. I mean, you want to be strict with your deadline because otherwise it might take years to finish anything. But at the same time, it doesn't have to be too constrained because otherwise it just, sometimes it would be too stressful just to try to get the deadline that you set for yourself.
Yes.
and not completing it. So it would be, not a positive ending.
Yes. Yeah, it's a
So
balance,
I
I
do
guess.
like to make like even like weekly challenges, something small
Mm-hmm.
that can be like done and dusted in a short span of time,
Mm-hmm.
because it gives you like the push to do something, but at the
Yes.
same time you don't drag it for too long, then it becomes worthless than making
Yes.
the effort even to
Yeah.
get to the end.
I'm interested, you mentioned that learning about the plants was a really nice aspect of your wildflower challenge. And I also read that you said an important part of drawing a wild plant is its identification. And I'm interested in chatting about this, about does naming a plant, does finding its species, does putting a name on it change your relationship with the plant? Does it change how you feel?
It does a lot. First, because you can recognize it even if in a different environment.
Mm.
And I find, for example, the same plant in different places, different altitudes as well, maybe with
Mm.
different colors or slightly different environment. And also, I don't know, because I have a scientific background,
Mm-hmm.
so that's probably the missing part of being an artist, that you go just free flow and all things beautiful, but you don't actually see the scientific part of it. And that helped me a lot, because it made sense to what I do for a living and for pleasure. So it was like the missing link between drawing a plant and actually studying a plant.
Mm.
um, and also it does help with the observation, because you see a plant from real life, and then you see either on pictures from like a guidebook or a drawing from a plant's guide, and you can see the difference. So sometimes you just look at a flower and say, okay, yes, I do recognize the flowers. Then you have a look at your reference book, and there are actually differences between the two. So you keep going deeper in the study and say,
Yes.
okay, it is the same plant, but actually this is a different variety. So it does add something
Mm.
to it. And I like taking notes as well, especially if I got the same plant but different variation of it. Maybe because I'm telling you the altitude. We live in Rome, so
Yes.
it's like sea
Interesting.
levels. But my in-laws, they live up on the mountains in central Italy, and I do find the same exact plant, but there are so many like very
Mm.
small differences than like naked eye and untrained eye can't see. But then if you get into the plant, then you can start seeing all these like subtle differences that, I don't know, if you're studying the plants, and then it does make things more interesting.
That's wonderful
Yeah.
to notice those, that you can notice changes in the variety and in different locations just because you've taken the time, taken the time to look closely and to observe those
Yeah, because
differences.
it's not just like it is observing things, but it is observing them as a different at a different level.
Yeah.
Um, so you start noticing things more clearly.
Mm, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
What is it about plants that you love? Because you're drawn to plants mainly as your focus for your work. And I'm interested, what is it about plants, of all the things in nature that you could be studying, what is it about plants that draws
To
you?
be honest, I don't know. I don't know. I remember, but this is something my husband make me notice, that my mom, she has in her kitchen, and she always had like some botanical illustrations.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Probably I grew up looking at those,
Yeah.
and my dad also had lots of like plants guide, recognition for
Mm-hmm.
recognition, and I always had them around. So I don't know if it was like another childhood memory that came back
Yeah.
later in life. But it all started one. I think it was a summertime, and I needed to go back. I was going back to work after the holidays, and I wasn't feeling like it. So I did find like an evening class on botanical illustrations. Plus, the word was like, okay, let's give it a try. And that's how I started. I got completely hooked up by plants and illustration, and it all started from there. So I started like buying plant guides and taking notes, and also plants, you can find them everywhere.
Yes, that's
especially
true.
here in Rome. Is, I don't know if because of the weather, or I don't know, but basically you can find wild plants even on the footpath, on the street, the cracks of walls, everywhere. And you start looking at them with a different eye. Like, it's not like some grass, any like generic grass, but you start looking,
Yes.
okay, this is a plant,
Yes.
let's see what kind of plant it is. So it's like, it changes my approach uh, to plants. And probably I like drawing plants because they're small,
Mm-hmm.
tiny, so it doesn't take too much.
Manageable. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Exactly, manageable time wise, but also I did study for a long time watercolor, but I can't do like big skies or big washes. I don't know why. It's my hand, the mix it with the water. I don't know. But with tiny flowers, it's much more easy to do them,
Mm.
to draw them and paint them. So probably because they're small, I find them more intriguing to draw and paint. And I did try adding into the my wildflower sketches animals, but I can't draw the animals. So
Mm-hmm.
I tend to add maybe a small insect, which is manageable as well because it's tiny, rather than big animals. I can't draw them.
I love what you said about the grass not being a generic grass. Once you start looking, you're looking at it as an individual species. And when you said that, it just struck me as really respectful. Like, it's easy for us to go through our days and say, not even register, or you're sort of walking and you just think grass, okay, flower, tree. You don't, it's easy not to individualize things, or to pay the respect to say, oh yeah, you are this type of grass, or yeah, look at you, to actually, it came across as really respectful, or it struck me as really respectful to say this is this individual grass and that you're important. Do you know what I mean?
To be honest, that's what it is. I mean, some people just like see grasses, especially here in Rome, that can grow everywhere, like a spreading things that needs to be taken out as soon as possible. But it's not like that. I mean, I some in my balcony I have some like wildflowers or even
Mm.
grass that I pick up from the street and then replanted back in my pots, just because for me it's a plant. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
if it's grass, if it's spreading, or if it has a beautiful flower. I don't know, it's part of the same family, so it's not like
Mm.
one is better or high ranking than the other.
Yeah.
And also because sometimes I was actually forced in a situation where there was nothing else to draw around, so I just started looking in much more
Mm.
details, and you can see the beauty even if it's like grass, generic grass. So
Mm.
it makes you look at things differently, because you start
Yes.
noticing not the plant with the environment, but the plant in itself.
Yes, I love
Um,
that. It's beautiful. I had the similar experience. I participated in a challenge, and it was a nature painting challenge, and one of the prompts was grasses, in fact. And once I started getting my eye into grasses, I realized how many different grasses there were, and how I had been doing that thing of just saying in my mind grass, 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 without differentiating. And once I was doing this challenge for that week, I realized there's tens of different grasses just around me, and they're incredibly beautiful when you stop to notice.
it is, but also I don't know where I read it, that if you take basically like an elastic band, like a large one, and you put it on a piece of like generic grass, and you
Mm-hmm.
look closely,
Mm.
then you can see different varieties and different things that if you like do a quick look you would never notice.
Yes.
So it's just observing from a different point of view, and actually observing much more in detail
Mm.
what you see, and then you can start, yeah, you basically you isolate your plant from the surrounding, and
Yes.
then you see you can see it in a different way.
Yes, and that's the whole beauty of nature journaling, I think, is that
Yeah,
That's
you basically you can bring up the beauty,
yes.
whatever plants you're
Yes.
looking at.
I love that. Yes, exactly. Let's talk about perpetual journals because you keep a perpetual journal. I wonder if you can explain what a perpetual journal is for people who don't know.
Yes, I got introduced to the perpetual journal by Lara Gustinger.
She's
Um,
amazing.
yes, she is. Basically, what you do, you just take a blank journal, uh, whatever page. I normally use watercolor pages, but it could be cardstock or just drawing paper. And it has to have 52 either pages or size of pages. So every page will be dedicated to one of the week of the year. So basically, you mark the first page with 1/7 of January, and then the second one 8, 14, and then you do the same for each page until the end of the year. And then on each page you put a drawing every week. So it's even here is it is a challenge, but it's not. Um, it doesn't put too much stress on you because you have
Yes.
a week to put an entry. And then what happened that once you reach the end of the year, you start again with the same journal. Basically, you'll end up, I've done it, this is my 5th year actually, and it's
Wow.
probably the longest project I ever
Yeah.
managed to keep because it's so easy. It doesn't put pressure at all on you because even if you skip a week, then the first year, I guess if I remember correctly, I left a few blank pages. But then coming back the following year, I had an entry, so I put something on that page. And then after 4 years, the page was full because I added 3 more drawings on it. And it is very, very nice to do. It is something very easy. Everyone can do it, and you can decide your own style. So it doesn't have to be you can put constraints. Of course, you can choose to put only different type of plant, different kind of plants, or do only trees, whatever you can decide. But it is amazing actually. I've started a new journal this year, and it is very nice because first of all you keep observing, and also it gives you something to do every week. So you every week I say, okay, this week I'm gonna take 10, 15 minutes to do something in my journal. And you can find 15 minutes in a week
Yes.
most of the time. So it does give you a purpose that is not like too demanding.
Yes, it is a challenge in itself, but it's a beautiful, manageable challenge. And you end
Yes.
up with these pages that are beautifully layered because they're years old and you're returning to the same season. So I guess you're seeing seasonality as seasonal changes through those pages of that journal.
It does, yes. It does. It does. And also, it doesn't put the pressure, when you start in a new page, then you say, okay, where I'm going to do it, I'm going to screw it up and everything. But in this case, then you just start drawing, even if it's like on the bottom corner, because you know that the following year, you'll add something else that will make the
Yes.
page fit together at the end. So it's not like organizing the pages for like a composition. It will come naturally after
Yes.
a few years. And as I said, if you skip a week, it doesn't matter. So you don't have to feel pressure to do it every week. And it is very nice. It is very nice to do because it does show your progress in
Yeah.
terms of even drawing. I mean, the first time I started, I didn't have a style.
Mm-hmm.
So I had different entries. One it was like with pen, another with pencil, and another with watercolor. But then after a few years, I realized that there was a style that I liked more than the others.
Mm-hmm.
So that helped me a lot, even in improving my skills, my drawing skills.
How did you find your style, or did you just notice that it naturally changed into that?
It did, because one week I was like drawing with pen, and then I didn't like the results. So then the following week I tried a different technique, and I like it slightly better. So
Mm-hmm.
carry on with this, and then turning back on the same page the following year, I said, okay, this is I didn't like. Let's try doing
Yeah.
something different. But as everything in art, then just have to practice,
Yes.
and probably don't be afraid to find straight away your style, and because it can be stressful as well.
Yes, that's interesting, isn't it? I don't know if I have a style, but I guess I do. Like, I look back over my pieces now and I can see that they do look similar to each other, and I didn't deliberately set out. I remember thinking years ago, actually, oh, that person has a lovely style. I wish I had a style. Where do I find my style?
I guess we've all been there.
Yeah. And I guess you just keep going, right? You just keep making art, and eventually you have a style.
But the good thing with sketchbook is that it's not like you don't have necessarily show it to everyone.
Yeah.
So it can be like an experimenting place where you can
Yes.
just try different techniques and add in different subjects. Because I know there are some plants that come up better than others because maybe it suits my style better. But you can experiment. That's the best place to experiment and to record as well. Because when I go back to my sketchbook, then I do remember exactly where I was when I draw that kind of plant. And sometimes I make notes about the weather and whatever feels like in the moment. So it is a nice way. It's like a journal. It is a journal. It's a visual journal. So some people like to write, some people like to draw.
Thank you so much for this conversation. It has pleased me so much. We've gone into the most amazing places about parenting and juggling life things and the value of a journal. It's been so fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bethan, for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Marina. I was inspired by all she had to say about how she manages to squeeze in sketching time, even how she used to have a sketchbook tucked into the couch cushions that she could grab quickly while her children were playing. I loved her reflections on art challenges, what works and what doesn't, and I especially loved our chat about colour and the changing seasons, and how naming a plant is a form of respect for that individual plant. I love all the things we touched on here. Please check the show notes for Marina's website and Instagram links. Her work is inspirational, so be sure to follow her there. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.